Welcome to episode 73 of Communicast, a communication skills podcast. I'm Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond, a global communication skills training organization. The first thing you say is rarely ever spoken. Love this point shared by my guest this episode, James Ferguson. James is the director of culture for the Wurzak Hotel Group and author of the Confetti Culture Playbook. In this episode, we talk about the 4 pillars of communication, effective listening, and the power of being concise. I hope you enjoy. James, thank you for joining me today.
Scott, thanks so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to our conversation. To kick it off, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your background, and the great work that you're doing today?
Sure. I feel very fortunate to create cultures where employees are seen, heard, and celebrated every day. I do that through, being an author of the Confetti Culture Playbook, through speaking, and then through my role as director of culture at Wurzak Hotel Group. I've been in a leadership role for over 15 plus years, but more recently I pivoted into this culture focused role, which has always been my passion. I always said as I was an operator of hotels, I was more in the people business than the hotel business, as I was always trying to, help build belief and help people be better versions of themselves. But from there, my book has allowed me to kind of leverage, my knowledge and my passion and pivot in my career. And again, I'm in the director of culture role where I oversee everything from employee engagement to onboarding to internal marketing and content creation to communications, which is our focus today, and everything kind of in between. So really feel fortunate to be on this side of things and to really impact so many people across our company and also other companies as I support through speaking. So
that is fantastic. And what brought you into this space? What was the driving force or maybe the pivotal moment that kind of attracted you to this?
I think it was the lack of, from culture standpoint, I had a lot of experience with not a lot of great leadership, not a lot of great culture consistency at companies that I started my career in. And so through that process, I had to fill the gaps and learn through it and either help others to become better or help support our initiatives to do so. And I always found when I was doing those things, I felt most passionate, most energized, most excited. And, through that, I've just kind of learned through the process and had a lot of things I did well and a lot of things that didn't go well. And from that, have found success as a top workplaces award winner, as well as some other really exciting awards, both from a team standpoint and individual standpoint, that has helped kind of emphasize that and the success I've found over time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm a big believer in culture and the impact that it can have on not only productivity in the organization, but just in general on people, their lives, their happiness, which in turn breeds the success, the engagement at work, the productivity. And if you think of a space like hospitality that is so customer focused, and communication plays a really big part of that, and making sure that you're having a great customer experience. And then with cultures or communication is a pivotal part of building a culture. It's not just about ping pong tables and snacks and things like that. It really is communicating and then matching your actions back to that communication. So communication, I'm sure, is a big part of your life and your role. So when you hear that somebody is a great communicator, I'm curious, what's the vision that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think you kicked it off there perfectly, because there's kind of 4 major pieces to communication, right? There's verbal communication, there's nonverbal communication, there's written, and then there's visual. And to your point, in my role as director of culture, I'm really trying to make sure that we hit all those marks. And I talk actually about it in my book, how those 4 things are like the legs of a chair, right? You kick one of those out and the chair falls down. And the same thing kind of with your operation or with your culture. If you have really good verbal communication, but the visual or the written doesn't match that, doesn't align well with it, or doesn't exist at all, you're going to struggle to land with your team members and across every level of the organization. So, for me, I kind of hit that in all cycles. I would say that verbal communication is the most powerful tool that we have in our tool belt, because what it allows us to do is to kind of provide purpose and set vision for the future, while also speaking things into existence and speak people into action. So that is definitely the thing that I think any leader, any listener today, sometimes we feel like we have to have all the aspects perfectly done. You might not be the best writer, you may not be able to create the most visual, captivating elements of communication, but verbal is something that we can all do it every day and do it well. And the more that we do it, the better we get at it. But again, in my role, from a nonverbal standpoint, I always note to this, I have a tattoo on my arm that says, the first thing you say is rarely ever spoken. And it's the same thing when you speak, right? I reference in my book about the clear eyes guy and how he's like, he talks very monotone and says, Bueller, Bueller, clear eyes. You don't want to be speaking in that way, in the way that you hold yourself, right? If I was on this podcast and I had my hand like this and was uninterested, that communicates things. So nonverbal is super important. But then, written is very key too. And one of the great things I've learned through my new role is that, and it's kind of goes back to speaking too, is that the more you say, the less they hear, right? So when you write these emails, you want to convey all this information. Same with speaking, you want to convey all this information, add the most value. But to a certain extent, through written communication, you can overload them and it becomes hard to really take away anything of value. So that's something that I've learned. And then visual, I think, is one of the other elements that I really enjoy, which if anyone listening or yourself follow me on LinkedIn, I'm constantly visually posting things that support communicating what I know and what has worked through culture and also what we're doing as a company. And I think that allows us to really tell our story both internally and externally, which is always a wonderful thing to do.
Love it. Some great clips there that I wrote down. The more you say, the less they hear. Absolutely agree on that. Conciseness is very powerful when it comes to communication. And I absolutely love this. The first thing you say is rarely ever spoken. That's very powerful because if you think about it, if you're giving a keynote presentation, before you start your first sentence, the audience they're going to see you, right? How you walk out onto that stage. Are you projecting confidence? And what are your facial expressions saying? Yep. In essence, what this speech is going to be about. Is it going to be an uplifting speech? Is it going to be a downer? Is this good news? Is this bad news? Same thing as you're interacting with your team. And the picture you painted of the chair with the four legs, right? The verbal, the nonverbal, the written, and the visual. It's so important to have not only all four of those, but to make sure that there's alignment between the four. Because if you're coming out and you're really upbeat and happy and trying to put a positive spin on things, but your actual message is terrible, that to me breeds distrust. When you create alignment, that when you're verbal and you're nonverbal, the visual components of your message or presentation, and then the actual words, the writing of it, when they're all kind of in alignment with the same, I guess, tone, I would call it, that's where you get the most momentum and people will believe you and trust in you, because it doesn't seem like you're trying to fool them by being upbeat when it's really a negative message, or you're somewhat, you have a negative demeanor, but it's something really positive. You're going to lose a lot of your momentum with doing that. So making sure you have all four, and then the best people, the best communicators really create that alignment between all four of those legs.
Yep, absolutely agree.
James, as you're working with your teams, across the properties, across the organization, what are some of the key communication skills that you're really seeing as mission critical for either folks coming on or that you're working to develop with your staff?
It's a great question. I think I'm going to answer it in two different ways. One thing that I'm really excited about right now that we're doing as an organization is really emphasizing and activating and trying to live out our brand pillars. And we're kind of doing that in three phases. One through awareness, the other through education, and then lastly through activation. And so there's a lot of communication that goes into that, right? Verbally, visually, written, all these different things. And the kind of the way that we've done that. So again, we don't want these to be words on the wall. We want these things that we live out, we actively pursue, and that ultimately impact our team members and our guests. And the way that we've kind of done that cycle, which is always fun to share, because some companies have old ones and want to renew, some don't have anything like this at all and want to understand the steps. So we kind of kicked it off by creating the visual side of it, by creating posters that have the brand pillars on them, put those in our back of house areas, and allowed our teams to visually see them every single day. And so that was kind of the first step to create awareness, right? We have them on our website. We now have them in our cafeterias. Everybody's fully aware of them, but then we have to educate. So the next step to that was creating these huddle exercises that we verbally communicated in our daily huddle. So those are things that we connect on every morning to kind of kick off the day. And through those, we connected our guest experiences and our team member experiences to the pillars and how they kind of align. And by doing that, small snippets each day, 10 minutes maybe, it allowed us to be educating our leaders on what those meant and how we apply them daily. And then the next phase was activation. So we recently rolled out a on-the-spot recognition program that took those brand pillars and we instantly acknowledge our team members for living them out through this on-the-spot recognition program. So it activates our leaders to get out of their office and go engage with their team, and then activates our team members to go actively live them out. So again, it's not just words on a wall, it's who we are. And from a communication standpoint, it just kind of hits all the elements of communication through that process. And it's been really rewarding and exciting to kind of see that unfold, because the program has really taken off, and it's truly made the feeling and the experience for our team members across the organization just so much better. And we're hearing it from them firsthand. So that's been great. But again, to the second piece, to answer your question, and this is something that I personally struggle with. I think we all do, which is why I want to share it. Is a lot of times when we communicate with one another, we don't listen to acknowledge or to actually hear them. We usually listen to respond. And I find myself constantly catching myself to not do that, because it's easy to do that. And I think naturally we want to hear our own or share our own point of view on stuff. But as leaders, those listening, the biggest thing that you can do right now, here and now, wherever you work, whatever industry, is to actively listen and then take immediate action. And by doing that, you'll ensure that your team members are seen, heard, and supported, which will add a tremendous amount of value to those team members and your business as you look to succeed.
Now that's interesting, because it's something I struggle with as well, and it takes lots of practice. I'm a natural problem solver. I'm a curious person. I like to solve problems. So when somebody's coming to me, and my immediate response is, I just want to jump in and say, okay, let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's get this wrapped up. Let's get it finished, versus kind of trying to calm myself down and truly listen. And for me, one of the big things that I've focused on to get to that point is really what I call my listening hygiene. In order to effectively listen and to actively listen, you need to create an environment where you can do so. So if I'm having a one-on-one with a team member, if my Outlook is open and I'm seeing all these emails popping up, I'm not going to be listening. I'm going to be more likely to just jump in with a quick response that might not be in line even with what they were talking about or what they asked. Is my communicator shut down? Is my office door closed? Do I have time blocked off for this? Am I in the right mind space to actively listen? So that has definitely helped me. And the other thing that you hit on that I really liked was, as you're talking about getting people to really live out the brand values, the brand pillars, was communicating not just in one channel. And this is where a lot of organizations falter, and then their message becomes noise. And as you said, it just becomes words on a wall. As that, okay, we send it out an email, or we literally put it on the wall and that's it. But you're starting to look through, what are all the different communication channels that we're going to use? Because one, people are going to respond better to different things. They're going to respond to seeing a poster. They're going to respond to an email. They're going to respond differently to being in a team huddle and their leader talking about it. So you're hitting on that, but then you're also realizing, if I just send this out in an email on a Tuesday afternoon, somebody could have been off that day. They're coming back from vacation. They're digging out. They had a mess going on at one of the properties. They're stressed out. They may have missed it. So if you do these things in a solitary way, or you just use the same communication channel every single time, your impact is going to be dramatically reduced.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a continued conversation for sure. And to your point, it's through a multitude of channels to ensure we just hit every mark in the way that people are, want to be best communicated with.
James, as you think about your career and the success that you've had growing to where you are today, the book, all the great things that you've done, if you had to pinpoint it down to say one, maybe two key communication skills that have really helped to differentiate you throughout your career and help set you apart and be successful, what would you say that would be?
I think less of a skill and more of a action would be daily huddle. And I mentioned that a few moments ago, and I'm going to share why that's been so impactful from a leadership standpoint. So, a lot of times in my industry and others as well, they're typically called a stand up. The
Mhm.
reason I call them a huddle is because I'm a big sports guy. Offline, we were talking about Clemson. I'm a big Clemson fan. But like a team comes together before a play, they huddle and they align and they make a plan to go take action together. And so, similar to that, there's kind of three C's that enable three E's to happen after it. So, communicate, collaborate, and celebrate daily. That's what I do in daily huddle that allows me to set me and my teams apart from others. When you communicate as a leader, again, kind of as a sports reference, the way that I handle those huddles is like a coach does at halftime, right? Like it's opportunity to rally the troops, to share story, to celebrate things, but also to set expectations. And I said earlier, those moments is when you get to speak things into existence and speak people into action. And if you don't utilize that tool and that time every single day, you miss the opportunity to do those things, which can be very profound and positive and impactful. So, that's the first C. The next is collaborating. So the way that you communicate to your team, are we going to do this together? Are you by yourself and alone, left to an island to figure things out? No. So in that huddle, you get to communicate, collaborate, and come together. If someone calls out, you all support that area. Hotels, sometimes you're flipping the whole house and there's support needed in laundry, or there's an event that's a flip in the middle of the day and you got to all get in there and help. When you do that as a leader, you're communicating that you're not in this alone, that I'm not just going to sit in my office and let you figure this out. I'm going to come help you. And so is everybody else, because when you need it, we're going to be there for you too. And then the most important piece, which is, where confetti culture comes about, is celebration. And again, when you communicate to your team that celebrating yourself, your department, your collective goals, your individual goals, and your personal stuff, whether it's a baby, an engagement, a wedding, a promotion, there's a number of things that we can celebrate, even a positive review. That's obviously something that drives our industry. There's always something to celebrate. And so trying to seek the good and celebrate it, verbally it's important, but also just setting that as a consistent effort allows your team to understand who you are as a leader and understand what you care about and what matters to you. And that sends a very positive message, especially if you do it every single day.
The celebration that you talked about, and for anyone that's listening to this, if you have a team that's maybe in a little bit of a rut or they're struggling or morale might be a little low, celebrating things along the way, celebrating the small wins, not just necessarily waiting for, if you're in sales, like the big deal to come through or a major milestone or a project completion. Celebrating the small wins along the way makes a big difference. And same thing here, positive review at Communispond, the main company here. When we get something from one of our course participants, a great review of a facilitator, or they reach out after their coaching and said, I went for a big promotion, I got it. A big part of it was the work that I did with your coach to help improve my skills. Or somebody goes out and leaves a glowing review on social media, whatever it is, they come to us and say, I went to your training 20 years ago, and now I want my team to go through it. Those get circulated all throughout our company because those are things that, get people jazzed up, that make them really passionate about what they do, because they start to see the connection between all the little parts, all the little pieces that and things that we do every day on the end user. And so, like I said, if
Absolutely.
you don't do this today, really, as you mentioned, that confetti culture, start celebrating the small wins and the small things along the way and not just waiting for the big things.
Absolutely.
James, who has been someone from throughout your career that has really influenced your communication style? Family member, mentor, whatever it may be, but maybe you've taken something from them and tweaked it, made it your own, put it into your toolkit. But who's somebody that's had a big influence on your style?
Well, I think, this week, I did something in huddles where I share a quote of the week, and my quote of the week on LinkedIn that I shared this week kind of pertains to this. And it's that what you read when you don't have to determines who you will be when you can't help it. And so for me, what that means, and then kind of the answer to your question is, I don't know that there's one individual that kind of changed the game for me or inspired me to change everything, but I think it's the compound effect of all the education that I've done behind the scenes, whether it's reading books or listening to podcasts, great ones like yours, or watching videos or of others people speaking. And it's just kind of the compound effect of all those things. And for me, education is so important to me. And I think often we forget that once school is over, that there's so much more to still learn and grow and improve from. And so I think from all the books that I've read to speakers that I listen to, I think it's just I've become a product of that effort behind the scenes. And for those that are listening, about every month I try to finish a book and I share it on LinkedIn. So if that's something that you want to follow along on, would love for you guys to follow me on there to see what I'm reading and what's impacting me and what I'm doing, because that's something that truly is a passion of mine as well, and has helped me become who I am today.
Yes, and if anyone from LinkedIn is listening to this, bring back the reading list. I don't know if you remember years and years ago, there's a feature on LinkedIn where you could put what your reading list was and link out to books. I loved that, not only to be able to share what I was reading, but to pick up on new things that other people were doing. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how often books or authors or reading come up when I ask that question. It's a powerful testament to the impact of reading, not only, as you mentioned, to just pick up so many strategies from different people. You pick up something out of this one, a little bit of something out of this one. But beyond that, and I stress this to my kids on a regular basis, one of the best things that you can do to improve your communication skills is to read. It's going to help your writing skills. It's going to help your planning and thought processing skills. It will even help your speaking skills. You're going to impact your vocabulary, understand dialogue, creating stories. So absolutely, reading has such a big impact on communication.
Yeah.
James, as we're wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have for somebody listening to this, really just about the importance of the skills that we talked about today and the impact that they can have on not only your professional life, but your personal life?
And it kind of goes back to what I just said about, reading. I think, you got to put the work in the unseen hours to earn the right for any opportunity, whether it's through leadership, speaking, or anything else. And so you have to practice what you want to be good at and the things that you want to pursue. There's a quote that I often share at the end of when I speak that I'll kind of close this out on, which is, "What you do speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you say." And for me, the way that I simplify that for my teams as a leader is, don't tell me you want something, show me. Don't tell me you're going to improve attendance. Don't tell me that you want to be a better communicator. Don't tell me that you want a promotion. Show me. And the way that you show me is through your actions, your effort, and your attitude. And that's all things that we all control. Everyone that's listening to this can control those things. And if you focus on that, everything else you have to hope to accomplish will become a direct result.
Agreed. Actions do indeed speak way louder than words. If you want it, you have to put in the work, get those reps in. If it comes to communication skills, it's about practicing, learning new skills to make sure that you're practicing correctly and practicing appropriately. But get those reps in. And once again, I stress this with my kids. I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, whether it's writing, reading, engaging with somebody one-on-one, they're at the doctor, we're at a restaurant, they're meeting with other adults. They're taking the lead on the communication so that they get that practice and get those reps in, because investing in these skills early will absolutely pay dividends later on. James,
Totally agree.
thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed our conversation. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you, man. Have a great day.
You too. A special thanks again to my guest, James Ferguson. James's point about putting in the work in the unseen hours is so powerful. Often people want the results, but they don't want the work that goes hand in hand with those results. Whether it is improving your golf game or becoming a better leader, you need to learn and practice. As we wrap up this episode, remember that the journey of improving communication skills is ongoing. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from conversations with future guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.